You're just jealous of your sister. My dad said it like it was a diagnosis, like he'd finally figured me out and could now dismiss everything I was feeling with one simple sentence. I was standing in my parents' living room in Louisville, Kentucky, my phone clenched so tightly my fingers were numb. Across the room, my mom let out this sharp little laugh from the couch, the kind of laugh that isn't funny at all, the kind that says, "Here we go again," like I'm some predictable problem they've handled 1,000 times. "I'm not going to the wedding," I said again, steady on the outside, boiling on the inside. "I have my reasons." My dad's arms folded over his chest, and I watched his face flush, that same familiar red I'd seen my whole childhood whenever I didn't perform the way he wanted. "Your reasons?" he snapped. "What reasons could you possibly have? Your sister is getting married, Jennifer. Family shows up. That's what family does. That's what matters." The irony almost made me laugh. Almost. But it wasn't the kind of laugh that would have helped me. It would have come out ugly and cracked and a little desperate, and I refused to give them that. Because the truth is, I know what it means to show up. I'm 28 years old, and I work as an event coordinator at Brightfin Wealth, a mid-sized financial planning company here in Louisville. I build schedules, manage vendors, deal with last-minute disasters that could ruin a room full of people's happiness if I'm not careful. I organize conferences, retreats, dinners, milestone celebrations, the kind of events where people dress up and smile and say things like, "I wouldn't miss this for the world." I've watched families show up for each other in ways that make your throat tighten. I've also watched what happens when they don't. When someone's chair stays empty and the person pretending not to notice starts breaking in tiny pieces they can't put back together. So when my dad stood there talking about family like it was some sacred, unbreakable law, I felt something shift behind my ribs. Not shock. Not confusion. Just this cold, clean clarity. My sister's name is Brooke. She's 25, works part-time at an upscale boutique downtown, and she has been the center of my parents' universe for as long as I can remember. Everything she does glows in their eyes. Every accomplishment gets treated like a miracle. Every mistake gets wrapped in protection and excuses and soft voices that say, "It's okay, sweetheart, you tried." 3 months ago, Brooke announced she was engaged to Tyler. And you would have thought she'd been crowned. My parents threw her a full engagement party at their country club, helped her book the most expensive venue in Louisville, paid for her dress without even blinking. My mom posted like she had a sponsorship deal, photos, updates, planning details, countdowns. Every day was another celebration of Brooke's perfect love story. And I did what I always do. I smiled. I liked the posts. I left comments that sounded supportive, because that's what a good sister does, right? But every time I saw another announcement, my chest tightened. Not because I wanted what she had. Because I already knew what it felt like to have a milestone treated like it didn't matter. Because 8 months ago, I got married too. Not in some flashy, magazine-style wedding. Mine was smaller. Intimate. The kind of wedding that feels like a real moment instead of a production. I married Owen, a steady, kind man who works as an architect at a respected firm downtown. We'd been together 4 years, building something quiet and solid that made me feel safe in a way I didn't even realize I'd been craving. When he proposed, it wasn't some public spectacle. It was a calm evening in our favorite park, the one with the walking trail and the old trees that look golden when the light hits them right. He got down on one knee like it was the simplest truth in the world, and I remember thinking, this is it, this is my life, this is my person. I sent invitations 6 weeks in advance. I didn't just toss them in the mail and hope. I called my parents to make sure they got them. I confirmed the date, the time, the location. I even offered to help if they needed anything, even though they lived 30 minutes from the venue. I tried so hard to make it easy. And still, nobody came. Not my parents. Not Brooke. Not my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, not a single person from my side. On the day I married the man I love, I stood at the altar with Owen's family filling every seat on his side, smiling, crying, holding each other's hands like they understood what it meant to witness someone's life changing. And on my side, there was this empty stretch of chairs that looked like a statement. My best friend Kelsey sat alone in the front row on my side, bless her, trying to make it look less humiliating by spreading her purse and her coat and moving around during photos like she could trick reality into looking different. But emptiness has a way of showing itself no matter how hard you decorate around it. I smiled through the ceremony. I held Owen's hands when we said our vows. I danced at the reception. I laughed at the right moments. I thanked people. I cut the cake. I posed for pictures. And every time I glanced toward those chairs, I felt my heart breaking into smaller, quieter pieces, the kind that don't make noise but still change you. Afterward, my family acted like nothing happened. A week later, my mom called me in that light, casual voice, like she was checking in after a dentist appointment. "How's married life?" she asked, cheerful. I stared at the wall while I held the phone, waiting for the part where she said, "I'm sorry, we missed it, I wish we could have been there." It didn't come. When I brought it up carefully, gently, like I was handling something fragile, she sighed like I was exhausting. She said she'd had a work project that couldn't be moved. My dad claimed a critical presentation. Brooke didn't even acknowledge my wedding existed. She just kept posting her life, her plans, her outfits, her perfect little world, like my wedding day was a made-up event that never happened. For months, I tried to swallow it. I told myself people mess up. I told myself maybe they didn't realize how deeply it hurt. I told myself there had to be a reason that would make it make sense. But pain doesn't disappear just because you try to be mature about it. It sits there. It waits. It shows up at Sunday dinners when everyone's laughing and you're smiling too hard. It shows up when Brooke starts talking about her wedding details and my mother's eyes sparkle like she's witnessing history. It shows up when someone tells you family shows up and you can still see those empty chairs like a picture burned behind your eyes. So standing there in their living room while they called me jealous, selfish, dramatic, I realized something that made my stomach turn. They genuinely believed Brooke's wedding was sacred. Unmissable. A duty. But mine was optional. Disposable. Forgettable. My mom stood up and walked toward me, her face shifting into that fake softness she uses when she wants control. She reached for my arm like she was about to soothe me, and I stepped back before she could touch me. "Jennifer, sweetie," she said, that patronizing tone that always made me feel 12 years old. "I know you're upset about something, but you need to put it aside. This is Brooke's day. You can't hold some grudge and ruin this for her." Grudge. That word landed like a punch. Like what I carried for 8 months was petty. Like my hurt was just an inconvenience for them to manage. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said, my hands shaking at my sides. "I'm just not going." My dad's voice sharpened. "Do you have any idea how this is going to look? What are we supposed to tell people when they ask where you are?" And in that moment, I looked at them, my parents, the people who were supposed to love me without conditions, and I felt this deep, aching sadness settle inside me like a heavy stone. "I'm not going," I said one last time, calm and firm. Then I turned, walked out of their house, got into my car, and drove home with my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Because I knew, with a certainty that scared me, this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about finally refusing to be treated like I'm optional. When I opened the door to our apartment, Owen was in the kitchen making dinner, the smell of garlic and herbs filling the space, music playing softly from his phone. He looked up, saw my face, and his expression changed instantly. "How did it go?" he asked, gentle. I swallowed hard. "Exactly how you think." He didn't ask for details right away. He just came over and pulled me into a hug, solid and warm, the kind of hug that says you don't have to earn softness here. And I let myself breathe into it, because I was so tired of being strong in front of people who only used my strength against me. I stayed in Owen's arms longer than I meant to. Not because I was falling apart, but because being held without judgment still feels like something I have to remind myself I'm allowed to accept. He didn't rush me. He never does. He just rested his chin lightly on the top of my head and let me exist exactly as I was in that moment. They don't get it, I finally said, my voice muffled against his chest. They really don't see what they did. I know, he said quietly. And that hurts more than if they did it on purpose. That was exactly it. If they'd been cruel outright, if they'd screamed or insulted me or admitted they didn't care, at least it would have made sense. But this was worse. This was dismissal wrapped in normalcy. Pain treated like an overreaction. Absence treated like nothing at all. We ate dinner mostly in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, just one of those evenings where words feel too small for what's sitting between you. Later that night, when we were in bed and the apartment was dark except for the street light bleeding through the curtains, my mind wouldn't slow down. It kept circling back to my wedding day. To the way I stood in my dress, smoothing imaginary wrinkles, telling myself they'd show up late, maybe stuck in traffic, maybe running behind. To how I kept glancing toward the doors during the ceremony, hoping, stupidly hopeful, that they'd rush in at the last second. They never did. I remembered the photographer pulling me aside gently, asking if I wanted to do family photos now or later. I remembered my throat tightening as I said, just a side is fine. I remembered Owen's mom squeezing my hand afterward, her eyes soft with sympathy she didn't try to hide. That was the moment something cracked in me. Not loudly. Just quietly, like glass under pressure. For weeks after, I tried to pretend it hadn't mattered. I told myself I was being dramatic. I told myself weddings were just one day. I told myself love isn't measured by attendance. But those empty chairs followed me everywhere. They followed me into holidays, where my parents talked excitedly about Brooke's wedding plans like nothing had ever happened. They followed me into family dinners, where everyone laughed and passed dishes and avoided my eyes whenever the topic of my wedding almost came up. They followed me into conversations with friends who'd ask, carefully, "So, your family didn't make it?" And I'd smile and say, "They were busy." Busy. That word became a blade. Now, standing in the aftermath of my parents calling me jealous and selfish, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. They weren't confused. They weren't unaware. They had simply decided my pain wasn't important enough to address. The next morning, my mom texted me like nothing had happened. "We need to talk about your attitude. Your father and I are very disappointed in how you behaved yesterday. Please reconsider attending the wedding. Brooke deserves better. Family is everything." I read it 3 times, my thumb hovering over the screen. Over nothing. That's what my wedding was to them. Nothing. I set the phone down and went to make coffee, my hands shaking just enough that I spilled a little on the counter. I didn't clean it up right away. I just stood there, staring at the dark liquid pooling against the white surface, feeling something inside me harden. I thought about all the times I'd shown up without being asked. Every birthday. Every graduation. Every celebration Brooke ever had. I was always there. Smiling. Clapping. Buying gifts. Writing cards. Standing in the background like a supporting character in someone else's story. And when it was my turn, they vanished. Not accidentally. Deliberately. That's when my mind went somewhere I hadn't let it go before. Somewhere uncomfortable. Somewhere dangerous. 3 weeks before my wedding, I'd gone to my parents' house to help my dad with something on their security system. They'd installed cameras after a string of break-ins in their neighborhood, and since I'm the tech one, I'd helped set it all up. I still had access. I hadn't thought about that in months. Until now. I told myself not to be paranoid. Not to go looking for pain. But there was this pull, this need to understand. To know whether this was really as careless as they claimed, or if there was something darker underneath. That afternoon, while Owen was at work, I opened my laptop. Logged in. Scrolled. back through the footage. And then I saw it. Brooke, standing in my parents' kitchen, holding my wedding invitation. She opened it slowly. Read it. Paused. Then she laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not an awkward one. A real laugh. Bright. Mocking. She crumpled the invitation without hesitation and tossed it into the trash like it was junk mail. Then she pulled out her phone and called someone. Her voice came through the audio clear as day. Yeah, Jennifer's getting married. Can you believe it? She doesn't deserve a real wedding anyway. Who does she think she is? My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might pass out. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding, my ears ringing. I watched it again. And again. Like my brain needed proof to accept what my eyes were seeing. I saved the footage. Once. Twice. 3 times. I didn't know why at first. Maybe because a part of me knew I'd need it. Maybe because I needed evidence that I wasn't crazy. That the pain I'd been carrying wasn't imagined. That night, lying in bed beside Owen, listening to his steady breathing, I realized exactly what that video was. It wasn't revenge. It was truth. And for the first time since my wedding, I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. I wasn't. Once you see something like that, you don't unsee it. It rewires the way your memories line up. Suddenly, every moment that felt confusing before starts making a terrible kind of sense. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brooke's face on that footage, the casual way she laughed, the ease with which she crushed something that mattered to me. It wasn't just cruelty. It was confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you'll be protected no matter what you do. In the morning, I moved through the apartment like I was underwater. Owen noticed immediately. He always does. He didn't ask questions at first. He just made coffee, slid a mug toward me, and waited. I saw something, I finally said. He looked up, alert but calm. What kind of something? I told him. About the cameras. About the footage. About Brooke throwing away my invitation and mocking me like my wedding was a joke she could laugh about with a friend. He didn't interrupt once. His jaw tightened as I spoke, his hand curling slowly into a fist on the table. When I finished, there was a long silence. That explains everything, he said quietly. It did. And somehow, that made it worse. Because for months, I'd been bending myself into knots trying to find an explanation that didn't hurt so badly. I'd told myself maybe they forgot. Maybe they misunderstood. Maybe there was some invisible reason that justified their absence. There wasn't. They didn't come because they didn't want to. And worse, because Brooke didn't want them to. The next message from my mom came later that afternoon. We're really disappointed in you, Jennifer. This behavior is hurtful and unnecessary. Brooke has been so excited about her wedding, and you're making this difficult for everyone. I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly as my eyes burned. Difficult. That was their word for me now. Not hurt. Not betrayed. Difficult. I typed out a dozen responses and deleted every one of them. Explanations. Accusations. Questions. None of it mattered. I already knew how this would go. Anything I said would be twisted into proof that I was dramatic, emotional, unreasonable. Instead, I typed one sentence. I'm not coming to the wedding. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The reply came almost immediately. What does that mean? I didn't answer. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to explain myself to people who had already decided I was wrong. That evening, I opened my laptop again and pulled up the video. I watched it all the way through without pausing. Without flinching. I let myself feel every sharp edge of it. The humiliation. The anger. The grief. Then something unexpected happened. The anger settled. Not disappeared, but clarified. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about embarrassing Brooke. It wasn't even about my parents, not really. It was about refusing to be erased. For 8 months, they'd acted like my wedding never happened. Like my marriage was a footnote. Like my pain was an inconvenience. They'd rewritten the story to protect themselves and crowned Brooke the victim of my so-called jealousy. I was done being quiet while they lied. I opened my editing software and dragged the footage into a new project. I trimmed it carefully. No dramatic music. No commentary. Just the raw truth. Brooke picking up. The invitation. Brooke laughing. Brooke throwing it away. Brooke's voice saying I didn't deserve a real wedding. At the beginning, I added a single black screen with white text. To my family, with love. That was it. The clip was less than 2 minutes long. Short enough to be undeniable. Long enough to say everything. When I exported the file, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. Owen stood behind me, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. You don't have to do this, he said gently. But if you do, I'm with you. I know, I said. And that's why I can. I emailed the file to my parents the next morning with a simple subject line. For the reception. In the body of the email, I wrote one paragraph. I won't be attending Brooke's wedding, but I wanted to send this video message to be played during the reception. Please make sure it's shown to everyone. It's important to me that the truth is finally seen. Then I closed my laptop and sat there, heart racing, feeling like I'd stepped off a cliff. The silence that followed was unsettling. No angry calls. No guilt-filled voicemails. No dramatic texts from my mom. Nothing. Days passed, and my phone stayed quiet. Too quiet. They're furious, Owen said one night as we sat on the couch. They're just deciding how to handle it. I nodded. I already knew. My parents have never confronted problems head-on. They freeze people out. They punish with silence. It's how they keep control. 3 days before the wedding, my mom finally called. Her voice was tight, controlled, clipped. We watched the video. My stomach dropped. Already? Of course we did, she snapped. We're not going to show something like that in front of 200 guests without reviewing it. So they'd intercepted it. Just like always. This is completely unacceptable, she continued. You're trying to humiliate your sister. We are not playing this video. It's not about humiliating her, I said, my voice shaking despite myself. It's about showing the truth. She threw away my invitation. She laughed at me. You all skipped my wedding and pretended it never happened. That was months ago, my mom said sharply. Why are you dragging this up now? Why can't you just move on and be happy for your sister? Because you never admitted you did anything wrong, I wanted to scream. Instead, I said it out loud. You never apologized. Not once. There was a pause on the line. Then her voice hardened. If you don't want to come to the wedding, fine. But we are not playing that video. It's cruel, vindictive, and beneath you. Cruel. I laughed then. A short, broken sound. What Brooke did was cruel, I said. I'm just refusing to hide it anymore. This conversation is over, my mom said. If you change your mind about attending, let us know. Otherwise, stay home. She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart pounding, my chest tight. They still didn't get it. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I didn't cry right away after my mom hung up. That surprised me. I just sat there at the kitchen table, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. It felt like my body was buffering, like it hadn't caught up yet with what my mind already knew. They were never going to play the video. Of course they weren't. They had watched it privately, together, in the safety of their kitchen, and still chose Brooke. Still chose silence. Still chose to protect the version of the family that made them look good. Owen came home not long after and found me exactly where I'd been when the call ended. He didn't ask what happened right away. He just knelt in front of me and took my hands, grounding me in the moment. "They won't play it," I said flatly. He nodded once. "I figured." "They watched it," I continued, the words tasting bitter. "They saw everything. And they still said no." That was the part that hurt the most. Not that they wanted to protect Brooke. That had always been true. But that even with proof, even with her own words echoing through that footage, they still refused to acknowledge what they'd done. It meant there was nothing I could say that would ever make them choose me. Owen was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said something that made me look up. "What if they're not the ones who play it?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your parents aren't running the reception," he said. Carefully. "The venue is. The DJ. The AV team. Someone else controls the screen." The idea hit me slowly, like a wave pulling back before it crashes. "You mean, go around them?" "I mean," he said gently, "you have the right to send a message. They don't get to decide whether the truth exists." My first instinct was fear. Pure, sharp fear. That would change everything. If I did that, there would be no pretending anymore. No half-reconciliations. No polite holidays. No illusion that we were still a normal family with minor issues. My parents would never forgive me. Brooke would hate me. I'd be the villain forever. But then another thought followed, quieter but stronger. Had they ever forgiven me for existing outside their expectations? I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the street below. I thought about my wedding day again. About explaining to the photographer why there were no family photos from my side. About the guests who whispered questions they tried to make sound gentle. I thought about Brooke laughing as she threw my invitation away. They crossed the line first. Owen stood behind me, his presence steady. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. "But don't protect people who never protected you." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was panicking, but because my mind was finally clear. The next morning, I made a decision. I called the venue. I'd worked with them before through Bright Fen. Corporate events, retirement dinners, end-of-year celebrations. I knew the staff. They knew me. They trusted me. When the events coordinator answered, her voice brightened immediately. "Jennifer. Hey, I heard your sister's wedding is here this weekend." Small world. I forced myself to sound light. "Yeah, it is. That's actually why I'm calling. I wanted to send over a short video message to be played during the reception. It's a surprise." "Oh, that's lovely," she said without hesitation. "We do those all the time." "When do you want it played?" "During the toasts," I replied. "Right after the maid of honor." "Perfect timing," she said. "Just email it to me and I'll make sure the AV team has it queued up." And, I added carefully, "My parents don't know about it yet. So if they ask, can you just tell them it's a surprise video from me?" She laughed. "Of course. We love surprises." When I hung up, my heart was racing. There was no going back now. I sent the video that afternoon with a polite, professional email explaining it was a personal message to be played during the reception. No details. No warnings. That night, the guilt tried to creep in. I imagined Brooke in her dress. My parents smiling proudly. Guests clapping and cheering. And then the screen lighting up. I wondered if I was going too far. But every time doubt surfaced, another memory followed it. Another dismissal. Another empty chair. Another reminder that silence had only ever protected them, never me. At 2 a.m, Owen found me sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. "You okay?" he asked softly. I think so, I said. Just, ready. Second thoughts? I shook my head. No. I just wish it didn't have to be like this. He took my hand. Sometimes truth doesn't arrive gently. The morning of the wedding felt strangely calm. I went for a long run. I showered. I ate breakfast. I read on the couch like it was any other Saturday. Around the time the ceremony would have started, I paused and pictured Brooke walking down the aisle. I wondered if she felt proud. Nervous. Happy. I wondered if she ever thought about me at all. By the time the reception started, I was pacing. I knew the schedule. Cocktail hour. Dinner. Toasts. This was the moment. At 6:17, my phone buzzed. It was Kelsey. Holy crap. My heart jumped into my throat. What's happening? I typed back. Your video just played. Everyone is stunned. Your parents look like they've seen a ghost. Brooke is crying. People are whispering everywhere. I sat down hard on the couch, my legs suddenly weak. It had worked. The truth was finally out. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I just stared at my phone as Kelsey's message glowed on the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The truth, the thing I'd been carrying alone for months, was no longer just mine. It was out there now, playing on a big screen in front of 200 people who thought they were there to celebrate a perfect love story. My phone started lighting up immediately after that. Call after call. Texts stacking on top of each other so fast I couldn't read them all. My mom. My dad. Brooke. Even numbers I didn't recognize, probably relatives who suddenly felt entitled to weigh in. I didn't answer a single one. Owen sat down beside me, calm but alert, like he was bracing for impact right along with me. It played? He asked. I nodded. It played. He exhaled slowly, then wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Okay. Then whatever comes next, we handle it together. For the first time since this whole thing began, I felt something that wasn't anger or fear or grief. I felt grounded. Kelsey kept texting updates like she was narrating a live event. People whispering. Guests pulling out their phones. My parents frozen in their seats. Brooke leaving the room in tears. Tyler standing there looking confused and pale, like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. Part of me felt sick imagining it. Another part felt strangely detached, like I was watching the aftermath of a storm I didn't cause but finally stopped running from. Then there was a knock at the door. It was loud. Sharp. Urgent. Owen looked at me. Do you want me to get it? I swallowed. Yes. He went to the door and glanced through the peephole, then turned back toward me, his expression tight. It's your dad. My chest tightened, but my voice came out steady. Let him in. When the door opened, my dad stormed inside like a thundercloud. His face was red, his jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. What the hell were you thinking? He shouted, not even bothering to lower his voice. Do you have any idea what you just did? I crossed my arms, my legs shaking but my spine straight. I told the truth. You humiliated your sister, he barked. You ruined her wedding. No, I said quietly. Brooke ruined my wedding. I just made sure people knew. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. That video was old. You've been holding on to that for 8 months just waiting to hurt her. I've been holding on to it because it's proof, I said. Proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that I wasn't crazy. So we missed your wedding, he snapped. So what? That was the moment something in me finally snapped clean in half. So what? I repeated. I stood at the altar alone. I had to explain why my family wasn't there. I smiled through one of the most painful days of my life while pretending it didn't matter. And you're asking me, so what? He took a step toward me. Owen stepped forward instantly, placing himself just slightly between us without touching either of us. The message was clear. "Get out," I said. My dad blinked. "What did you say?" "Get out of my house," I repeated. "If you still can't see what you did wrong, then I don't want you here." His face twisted with rage. "You're going to regret this. You're throwing away your entire family." "Maybe," I said evenly. "But at least I'm not throwing away myself." He stared at me for a long second, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard the walls shook. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I just stood there, breathing, while Owen wrapped his arms around me. "I'm okay," I said, surprised to find it was true. The days that followed were chaos. My mom sent a long email accusing me of being vindictive and cruel. Brooke left a sobbing voicemail calling me a horrible sister. Extended family members reached out, some angry, some confused, some quietly apologetic. But something unexpected happened too. People who'd been at the reception started messaging me privately. Friends of the family. Distant relatives. Even a couple of my parents' friends. They said things like, "We had no idea. We're so sorry you went through that." That must have been incredibly painful. Not everyone took my side. But enough people understood that I stopped feeling like the villain in my own story. 2 weeks later, Brooke texted me. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't owe her anything. But I agreed to meet her for coffee. She looked smaller when she walked in. No makeup. Red eyes. She sat across from me in silence for a long moment. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked. "Because you never apologized," I said. "You threw away my invitation. You mocked me. And everyone pretended. It didn't happen." Tears filled her eyes. "I was jealous," she admitted. "Of you." I blinked. "Of me?" "You've always had your life together," she said quietly. "When you got engaged, it felt like you were leaving me behind." I was awful. I know that. It didn't erase what she did. But it explained something. "I'm not ready to forgive you," I said honestly. "But I appreciate you saying you're sorry." She nodded. "I understand. My parents didn't apologize. Not right away. They doubled down. They stopped calling. Stopped inviting me to things. It hurt, but not the way it once would have. Because I wasn't chasing them anymore. Life moved forward. I poured myself into work and earned a promotion. Owen and I talked about buying a house. We built routines that felt peaceful instead of performative. A year later, I found the video file on my laptop. I watched it once more. Then I deleted it. I didn't need it anymore. Because the truth had already done its job. The quiet that followed was unfamiliar, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that settles in after a storm has burned itself out, when the air still feels heavy but you can finally breathe without bracing for impact. For a long time, my parents didn't call. Weeks passed, then months. Holidays came and went without invitations. No awkward group texts. No forced smiles. No pretending. It hurt, but not in the sharp, panicked way I'd expected. It was a dull ache, manageable, like a healed bone that still knows when rain is coming. Owen and I settled into a rhythm that felt honest. Not perfect, not curated, just real. Mornings with coffee and shared silence. Evenings with cooking and music and laughter that didn't feel earned, just natural. For the first time, my nervous system started to relax. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd spent my entire life anticipating disappointment. At work, I thrived. Without the constant emotional drain of trying to keep my family together, I had space to think, to lead, to create. I was promoted to senior event coordinator, trusted with bigger clients and higher stakes. People listened to me. Valued my judgment. It felt surreal how easy things became when I stopped fighting to be seen. Every once in a while, news about my family drifted in through mutual connections. Brooke's marriage was struggling. People whispered about tension, about fights that never resolved, about a distance that felt eerily familiar. I didn't feel smug about it. I just felt sad. Patterns don't disappear just because the spotlight shifts. About a year after the wedding, a letter arrived in the mail. My mom's handwriting was unmistakable. Neat, careful, controlled. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Dear Jennifer, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We realize we didn't handle things well after your wedding. We should have been there. We're sorry. We hope one day we can rebuild our relationship. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. It wasn't the apology I'd dreamed of during all those sleepless nights. It didn't name the favoritism. It didn't mention Brooke's behavior. It didn't acknowledge the months of gaslighting or dismissal. But it was something. I didn't rush to respond. I put the letter in a drawer and let it sit there. Owen didn't push. He never did. Take your time, he said. You don't owe anyone a reaction. A few months later, I wrote back. Not emotionally. Not angrily. Just honestly. I thanked them for the apology. I told them I needed accountability, not just regret. I explained that I couldn't have a relationship where my pain was minimized or rewritten. If we were going to rebuild, it had to be based on honesty and respect, not appearances. I sent the letter and didn't think about it again. 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was different. Softer. Less defensive. Jennifer, she said quietly. I got your letter. We talked for an hour. She told me they'd started therapy. That hearing the video, really hearing it, had forced them to confront things they'd avoided for years. She admitted they'd protected Brooke at my expense. Not because they didn't love me, but because it was easier. Because I'd always been the strong one. The one who didn't make trouble. I thought you didn't need us as much, she said. I was wrong. It wasn't a clean conversation. There were pauses. Deflections. Moments where I had to repeat myself. But it was real. My dad apologized a few weeks later. Awkwardly. Uncomfortably. But sincerely. We didn't go back to Sunday dinners or family vacations. We rebuilt slowly. Carefully. With boundaries. Brooke and I stayed distant. Civil, but not close. She moved away after her divorce, started over somewhere new. I wished her well from afar. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt to move forward. Life continued. Owen and I bought a house with a big backyard and terrible paint choices we slowly fixed together. We adopted a dog named Charlie who had more energy than either of us combined. We talked about kids. About the kind of parents we wanted to be. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the trees, I said something that surprised even me. What if I'm afraid of becoming like them? Owen looked at me, calm and steady. You won't. How do you know? Because you see the patterns, he said. And you chose to break them. That was the difference. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need validation. I didn't even need everyone to understand why I'd done what I'd done. I understood. The video hadn't been about destroying my family. It had been about reclaiming my voice. About refusing to let my pain be erased for the sake of comfort. Sometimes, telling the truth costs you relationships. Sometimes it costs you time. Sometimes it costs you peace in the short term. But silence costs more. I'd learned that the hard way. 5 years later, the past doesn't sting the way it used to. It exists now more like a scar than an open wound. A reminder, not a sentence. I stood in the backyard one evening, watching Owen throw a tennis ball for Charlie as the sun dipped low and painted everything gold. Our house wasn't perfect. The fence leaned a little. The grass had dry patches. But it was ours. Built on choices made consciously, not out of obligation or fear. I used to think peace meant everyone getting along, I said out loud, more to myself than to him. Owen smiled faintly. And now? Now I think peace means not abandoning yourself just to keep the room quiet. That was the lesson my family never taught me. One I had to learn the hard way. The years after the video changed everything. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. My parents and I found a new rhythm, distant, but respectful. Conversations were careful. Honest in a way they'd never been before. We didn't pretend anymore. We didn't rewrite history. That alone felt revolutionary. My mom admitted, eventually, that favoritism had been real. That she'd relied on me being the strong one, the reasonable one, the one who wouldn't make waves. My dad admitted he'd equated fairness with effort, and because I never demanded much, he assumed I didn't need much. None of that erased the past. But it gave it context. Brooke and I never returned to what people like to call sisterly closeness. And I stopped trying to force it. Some relationships don't heal through proximity. They heal through distance and acceptance. I heard she was doing better. Therapy. A new job. A quieter life. I wished her well and meant it. What surprised me most was how little anger I carried anymore. For a long time, I thought anger was the problem. That I needed to let it go to be healthy. What I eventually realized was that anger had been information. It showed me where my boundaries had been violated. Once I listened to it and acted, it softened on its own. The video, the thing everyone remembered, stopped feeling like revenge. It felt more like a line in the sand I finally drew. At work, I continued to grow. I became someone younger colleagues came to for advice. I told them something I'd learned late in life, that professionalism doesn't mean self-erasure, and loyalty doesn't mean silence. Owen and I talked about children seriously. Not in the abstract way people do, but in the real, grounded way that comes from knowing what not to repeat. I knew the kind of parent I didn't want to be. And that clarity felt like a gift. One night, while cleaning out an old drawer, I found a printed screenshot from that security footage. I must have printed it during the worst of it, when I needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I shredded it. Not because it wasn't true. But because I didn't need it anymore. I no longer needed evidence to justify my feelings. I trusted myself now. That trust changed everything. Looking back, I understand why people were uncomfortable with what I did. Truth has a way of disrupting carefully curated stories. It forces people to pick sides or confront things they'd rather ignore. But I also know this, some truths need air. They rot when they're kept in the dark. If I hadn't sent that video, my family would have continued pretending nothing happened. I would have continued swallowing my pain to keep the peace. And slowly, quietly, I would have disappeared. Instead, I chose myself. That choice cost me years. It cost me comfort. It cost me relationships that were never as unconditional as I believed. But it gave me something far more valuable. My voice. My dignity. My life. As I stood there watching the last light fade, I felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph. Not bitterness. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from living honestly. From knowing your worth. From refusing to be small so others can stay comfortable. And if I had to make the same choice again, knowing everything it would cost and everything it would give me, I wouldn't hesitate. Some truths are worth telling. Some lines are worth crossing. Some bridges need to burn so you stop walking back to places that never protected you.